Hey bestie, it's time for your next session of Real Talk Friend Therapy with your favorite big sister auntie queen, Daysha Veronica. Hey y'all, how are we doing? How are we surviving this vicious Mercury retrograde? Cause let me tell y'all, she has been dragging me by my edges down the block and around the corner, okay? Like, I will be lucky if I look like Cynthia, Angelica's little bald-headed Barbie doll from the Rugrats by the time this is all over. I mean, I was so excited to go back to Boston to meet my two new nephews. My sister and my brother both had their first kids last year, and unfortunately, my sister gave birth prematurely. I was actually literally there the day she went into labor. It was the scariest thing I have ever been a part of, but thankfully she made it out healthy. My nephew is also very healthy now. It's kind of crazy to look at the photos of him when he was born prematurely. He was born at 2.2 pounds, y'all. And now he is nice and healthy. I think he's like somewhere around like 10 pounds now. It's crazy. But she didn't get to have her baby shower the way that she initially planned. And so we recently had a makeup one for her. But let me tell you, of course, the day of my flight, Boston was having a nor'easter, which for those who don't know what that is, it's just a really crazy, intense storm. So none of this surprised me because, again, it's Mercury retrograde, and the retrograde is all about delays, confusion, just crazy, general craziness. Now, my flight was a two-parter. So I stopped in Colorado, and then I was going from Colorado to Boston. And I'm thinking, well, surely they're going to delay or cancel this flight because of the storm, and I'll get to stay in Colorado for a day on the airline's dime, whatever. But no, we left Colorado on time, if not a few minutes early, but it also wasn't a full flight. So I had an aisle to myself. I could really spread out. So then I'm like, maybe this won't be so bad. But y'all, when I say everybody collectively on this plane thought this was the end, I mean, the turbulence was so bad, they had to clean up like 40 minutes before we landed. And then the drops, like when we got on the ground, the plane erupted into applause. Like, it was truly a moment that I never want to be a part of again. But then what's so funny is that on my way back to California, I'm stopping in Nashville this time. So I'm like, it should be all good with the weather. It's the South. It's typically warm. It's April. It should be fine. And literally it's raining harder than when I landed in Boston. So I also had turbulence on that flight, but definitely nothing like the first one. The first one was like, I had never felt closer to Jesus in my life. So I'm like, I love the East Coast, but y'all need to get the weather together over there. It's April. It's springtime. Okay. Nobody has time for all of these drops and feeling like they're about to die. And then, all right, because we're not done. So anyone who gets off a flight knows that all you want to do is take a nice warm shower to get all of that like grime off of you. But of course, because it's a retrograde, my water heater decided to bust, but because it's a leak and leaks aren't covered under my home warranty, my boyfriend and I are gonna have to come out of pocket for it. And I'm trying to be calm through all this crazy, but man, I'm at a point where I'm literally counting the days until we're out of this retrograde, like literally Xing them off of my calendar. Anywho, I hope y'all are surviving and thriving better than me, and I'm so happy to be back and recording this next episode. So this week is a Better You, Better Friend episode, which if you're new to the podcast, this is a mini series that is all about offering tips and strategies to help you become a better version of yourself in order to become a better friend to those around you. And our topic this week is all about digging deeper into what it means to be lonely versus being comfortable with being alone. When I had my little high school reunion at my house a few weeks back, my friend Kendall asked me if I felt lonely moving to a new town and being so far from LA now and all of my friends. And I had to really think for a minute. My initial response was no, but as I continued to sit with the question, I actually do think that I experienced some loneliness at the beginning, and I'm going to get more in depth about how I worked through that later. But initially I said no because if anything, since I live so far away now, it's either the people who really care about seeing me that are going to drive all of this way, or, I'm only going to extend an invitation to people I really like because there's a good chance they're going to need to sleep over, and I don't just want anybody sleeping over at my house. So in a lot of ways, it's allowed me to be more intentional about who I'm hanging out with from my past, because anyone who has lived in LA can tell you that making friends here, and I mean real, solid, ring 1, ring 2 type relationships, it's hard. And if you're new to the podcast and wondering what I mean by ring 1 and ring 2 relationships, I highly recommend that you go back and listen to episode 3. It's called What is Friendship? And that's where I go super in depth on what that means. But essentially, they are the strong and meaningful relationships that we have in our lives, the people that we would call our best friends or our close friends. And I know that making friends in any major city can be challenging, but honestly, I feel like making friends in LA truly has to be its own episode, because while I've found amazing, deep, lifelong relationships here, I will tell you more often than not, especially if you are in the influencer, content creator, entertainment industry space, it's this weird thing where in reality, you're networking. But because it's such a social space, people will make it seem like they're offering friendship to you, but they're really not. And to be honest, it's okay-ish. I mean, networking is a part of life. There are plenty of people I've reached out to across my career to pick their brains about career moves I should be making or for introductions and favors. And personally, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But I guess what I'm not cool with is how people in my industry will make it seem like they're offering more than networking when they really aren't. And that's where I think people then get this icky feeling about networking and they don't like to do it, when in actuality, I think networking is totally fine when both parties understand upfront that we're networking and being somewhat transactional with this relationship. And this is actually making me think, in the future, I'd love to do an episode distinguishing what it means to be part of someone's circle and what it means to be part of someone's network, because there's definitely a distinction, but I don't always think that that distinction is clear. And, I'll also say that it can get icky when people make our networking conversation out to be more than what it is. So they're kind of pushing friendship on people when those cues weren't actually there. It's like, I'm willing to help you with your career in whatever easy way for me that I can, but I wasn't necessarily extending friendship to you. This is not to say that networking relationships can't turn into real friendships, but more so that in order to make that transition successfully, the cues have to be there from both parties. And so all of this confusion at the start of making new relationships, or possible missed signals, and just general lack of clarity in the friend-making process, this can all definitely contribute to our feelings of loneliness and isolation. So let's dig into what it means to be lonely. As I mentioned in the first episode, loneliness, especially in the US, has become a public health crisis. In We Should Get Together by Kat Velos, she cites this crazy stat that made me audibly respond, which is that the average American has not made a new friend in the last 5 years, and that 80% of the 2,000 people surveyed, so like 1,800 people, actually, you know what? Let me not do math on the fly, because y'all gonna come for me. Be like, Daysha, that's not 80%, blah, blah, blah. So 80% of the 2,000 people surveyed said that enduring friendships are hard to keep. Y'all know by this point that I love a good definition, and that sometimes digging into the meaning of these words can actually provide some real useful context, or just make for hilarious commentary. So Merriam-Webster defines lonely as being without company, cut off from others, not frequented. What the fuck? Why can't I say frequented? Not frequented by human beings. Lord have mercy. Sad from being alone or not being able to say frequented in my case. And lastly, producing a feeling of bleakness or desolation. All right, so immediately, I like these definitions a lot better than the hodgepodge that we got when I looked up friend, except for frequented. Oh, there it is. There it is. But if you want to know what that experience was like when we looked up the definition of friend, you have to listen to episode 3. But okay, let's do one more. Cambridge Dictionary says, unhappy because you are not with other people, and feeling sad because you were alone. So real short, sweet, and to the point there. So looking at these two definitions, some themes that pop out to me are that loneliness is a negative experience that we have, that when we experience it, we are likely to be sad or to have a sense of bleakness about the world, which again, the research completely supports. In fact, there are many studies that have shown that loneliness has a significant impact on our health, that it is equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day, and it can also increase the risk of premature death by 26%. But most importantly, I also see that it's a feeling, and it's a feeling that is often triggered in us when we are not around other people. But the phrasing that really sticks out to me is cut off, when we feel cut off from other people. And I actually think that's why, even though I spend most of my days alone, I rarely feel lonely because I've learned how to not be cut off from the people I care about. Now, I want to take a moment to emphasize that loneliness is a feeling, because if you listen to episode 2, where I reference a popular life coaching framework, then you know that our feelings are actually controlled by our thoughts. And this means that we actually have more control over our loneliness than we feel that we do. And if you want more background on that coaching framework, again, highly recommend going back to episode 2. But just a brief overview of that framework is that in life, we all have given non-debatable circumstances, like the income bracket that we grew up in, or our ethnicity, or that our parents divorced when we were 5. These are circumstances that are just the facts of our lives. And from these circumstances, we developed a belief about the world that shapes how we think and process events that happen to us. So if we go with the parents divorcing when we're young circumstance, this might have shaped some of us to believe that true love isn't possible, or that all men or women are cheaters, or that falling in love is for suckers. You get the point. Then from that belief, we form our feelings. So let's say your parents split because your mom cheated, and you developed a core belief that everyone's a cheater. It's not a matter of if, but when. That is going to produce a lot of negative feelings like stress or anxiety or anger whenever you date someone and you start getting more intimate. Because in the back of your mind, you have trained yourself, you have constantly told yourself to believe that no one will ever be faithful to you. So then because you are always stressed and anxious around your partner, it causes you to take actions in your relationship that might reflect those feelings. So maybe you withhold information, or you lie, or you're not super affectionate. Under the guise of the model, this means that these actions will dictate what your final result is going to be within your relationship, which could be that your partner does cheat on you, or they break up with you because they feel like they can't get close to you, or whatever that result may be. In a lot of ways, this method, also known as CTFAR, circumstances, thoughts, feelings, actions, results, plays off of the psychological phenomenon of the self-fulfilling prophecy, which also puts forth the idea that our beliefs set actions in motion that will cause the belief to come true. So from this, I have 2 takeaways. 1, as I've mentioned before, it's a great reminder that our thoughts, particularly our subconscious thoughts, the things that we think right in the moment of experiencing something, are key to the outcomes we want in life. And 2, the loneliness that we might be experiencing is actually a product of our thoughts rather than our circumstances. Now, I know some of y'all might be like, but Daysha, I am actually alone right now. Like, how is that a feeling when I legit have no friends? So let's break it down. Yes, you are alone. That is the fact of the situation. Maybe you just moved to a new city, or you're starting college in a new place, or whatever the case may be. So you are literally alone. But this is where I want you to see the difference between loneliness and being alone. Being alone is just a circumstance. It is just the fact of the situation. But loneliness is just one of the many feelings that can come from that circumstance. However, it's not the only one. And that's where your thoughts on being alone come into play. At some point in life, you may have learned to associate the circumstance of being alone with negative emotion. And why would you have thought that? Because it's not like in our society, we say women who don't have a family by a certain age and choose to live alone are lonely in a bad way. And I highlight women because we don't do that to men. We are more than happy to let Leonardo DiCaprio be his single and free bachelor self. But if you are, say, Jennifer Aniston, we could talk all day about how terrible it is and how awful her life must be because she's single and doesn't have kids and whatever. Even though homegirl is sitting stacks deep on that friend's money, okay? Like, I think she is doing pretty well for herself. But again, and this is not to pick on Leonardo DiCaprio either, I'm happy that he loves being however old he is and flirty and thriving. But just to call out that for women in particular, being alone is a much bigger social stigma than a man being alone. We say that the person that sits alone at lunch is a loser. We say that the person that's dancing alone in the club is a weirdo. We pity people who take solo vacations or even those who masturbate because how sad is it that they have to get themselves off? Which, real talk, most women are getting themselves off when there's a man involved anyway, okay? But I have to say it's not like that with my current relationship. Shout out to my bae, hashtag she comes first. But I've definitely had moments like that with other people. I mean, this is real talk friend therapy. So let's just say there was one guy who literally left in the middle of us being intimate because I wouldn't do a certain sexual act. But anyway, my point in all of this is that for many people, it has been deeply ingrained in us to view being alone as a negative thing. So then because of all of those beliefs that we've absorbed about being alone being a negative thing, when we are alone, we choose to think negative thoughts about that circumstance. It's sad that I'm alone on this Friday night. I'm a loser for being alone on vacation. I'm so weird for having dinner at a restaurant by myself, and so on and so forth. But in reality, it does not have to mean that for you. And I highlight for you because we can't control what other people think. Other people might think those things, like real talk they might. But guess what? We're not clairvoyant. We cannot hear their thoughts. And since we'll never truly know what most people think about us, why not choose to think more positively about being alone? Because that's what's going to give us peace. Now, I know what some of y'all are thinking. I can't fake being happy about being alone, Daysha. And lucky for you, I'm not asking you to. I really, really, really hate the saying, fake it until you make it. Because it means you're trying to change something about yourself from a disingenuous place. But I get the sentiment. And I actually think the better way to get that sentiment across is saying to believe it until you achieve it. Because I don't want anything about you to be fake, okay? Everything we do here is about making real change and providing real results, which means it has to come from a real place, which means you have to believe in yourself. So if being alone makes you think sad thoughts or makes you feel uncomfortable, let's do something about it. When I first moved to my new area, I had a work from home job, but my boyfriend still commuted into LA for work. So this meant that I only ever really saw him on the weekends. And we would get into these big fights about it until I realized that my loneliness had nothing to do with him and everything to do with the fact that I was choosing to cut myself off from people. I literally never left the house unless he was home. But again, that was not on him. That was on me. I was choosing to make him my only source of human connection. So what did I do about it? We got a dog, my baby Harlow. And Harlow got me out of the house twice a day for walks and allowed me to meet other dog owners in the neighborhood and have little chit chats. We threw a garage sale, which allowed me to get to know more of our neighbors. We are actually known as the garage sale people in the neighborhood. We were literally cleaning out the garage, and one of our neighbors came up and they were like, "Oh my gosh, are you guys doing a yard sale?" And I was like, no, we're just cleaning this time. But it allowed me to learn their names. Then I invited my friends from LA or out of town to stay with me. And because we have a guest room, they stay with me for long periods of time. And now I'm currently trying to save up money to get a car so I can find interesting classes to take around town to meet more people. So if you've been feeling lonely, know that I've been right there with you. But again, being alone does not have to equal being lonely. And in fact, I've actually either made really good friends venturing off on my own, or I've deepened the relationships with people I already knew by going at stuff on my own. 2 examples. So first, when I was in college, I studied abroad in Florence with my best friend. And at the time, I had a boyfriend, but our relationship was really on the rocks. And I remember just wanting to end my study abroad trip early so I could go be with him and fix our issues. So for like 3 months out of my 4-month program, I was just counting down the days until I could go home. But then he broke up with me. And it's so funny because telling this story makes me like real mad. I'm like, bitch, you are in Florence. How could you let some man boy be the center of your experience in Florence? Anyway, while it was devastating at the time, I also had that realization in that moment, and I'm very happy for that. And so because I had about a month left to really enjoy my time there, I made an intentional effort to just go out and explore by any means. So there's this town in northern Italy called Cinque Terre, and that translates to the 5 lands because it's this beautiful, beautiful seaside area made up of 5 towns that are right next to each other. And I highly recommend seeing it if you ever get a chance to go to Italy. It's well worth the trip. I believe it's where focaccia bread was created, but don't quote me. Anyway, I asked my best friend if she wanted to go with me for a day trip, but being the studious person that she was, she wanted to study for finals instead. So I respected it, even though I didn't like her response. So I had to decide if I was going to go alone or if I was going to do something else. And you know what? I said, fuck it. I want to go. You know, I'm living my best life. I'm eating and praying and loving. So I'm going. And, you know, I was hella nervous, but at the same time, being alone also allowed me to be open to meeting new people, which is exactly what I did. This girl and I really hit it off on the bus ride over there, and we just decided to spend the day together, going to the beach, eating little snacks, just doing our thing together. Now, am I still in contact with this person? No, but I will always have fond memories of that moment because we were just 2 like-minded people who didn't want to be held down by the fear of being alone. And we kept each other company, and it was a fabulous time. You know, not everyone you meet is going to be your best friend or even someone that you keep in touch with. But I think that's what's also contributing to our feelings of loneliness. We're putting way too much pressure on the people we meet to be the one. And I get it. We want them to be the one so we can stop searching and just have all the fun and all the memories and enjoy the friendship. But that's where I would push you to also find joy in the process of searching. Because let me tell you, I used to be the same way, but about finding a romantic partner. I just wanted to find the one. And I went to my psychic. Actually, it's a family of psychics. So my psychic wasn't there. So I went to her sister and I was like, I'm so sad because another guy broke my heart. And why can't I find my person? And I'm just so over this. And she looked at me like, girl, forget him. You are going to be going on so many dates soon. You're going to find them. Just be patient and enjoy the process. So again, it was like, what the fuck do I have to lose? Like, okay, fine. I'm just going to date with no expectations. And I tell you not, like within 2 months of her telling me that, I met my boyfriend who I've now been with for almost 8 years. There was a little break in between there, but it was like for a couple months. So it's basically been 8 years. So I highly encourage you to find the joy or the excitement in the searching process, because weirdly enough, the less attached you are to what you want, the more likely you are to achieve it. And I have to say that when I made that mindset switch, as much as I love being with my boyfriend, at the time, I was also having so much fun dating with no expectations. It just took so much pressure off that I didn't even realize I had been creating, and it just allowed me to experiment and say yes to people I wouldn't normally say yes to, and just learn more about me. One of my writing teachers told me this, and I always carry it with me because I love it and I think it's relevant. She would say, be committed to everything and married to nothing. And I think it definitely translates to this process. Be committed in your search for real lifelong friendship, but don't be so committed that you reek of desperation. My second example of how it deepened an existing relationship is that I love salsa dancing. It gives me so much confidence in my body. And when I first started taking classes, I used to go alone. But when I would meet people, I would tell them about this hobby I have. And one of my friends, Amy, who I met through Becky, was like, that's so cool. Would you be willing to take me one time? And I was like, hell yeah. And now, many years later, and Amy is way more consistent about going to class than I am, but it became a way that Amy and I deepened our relationship outside of Becky, because we'd go to class together and then we'd go out to salsa clubs and festivals. And, you know, even with the festivals, Amy didn't go at first. I would just go on my own and dance my little heart out till 5 a.m. and just embrace whoever I met when I would go. I actually have a really funny story about that, because there was one year, I don't remember what birthday of mine it was, but for one of my birthdays, I was like, I want to salsa dance into my birthday, because these festivals were usually around my birthday time. And so I had spent the evening with Becky and Amy at their apartment with some other friends celebrating, la la la. And then I call an Uber. And as I'm calling the Uber, I'm putting on my salsa shoes. And Becky and Amy watch me and they're just like, wait, Daysha, like, aren't you going home? And I was like, oh no, girl, I'm going out. And they're like, but it's like 11 o'clock at night. And I was like, yep, I am going to salsa dance my way into my birthday or out of my birthday, whatever. And I'm just gonna enjoy the night. And the look on their faces, they were like, who is this woman? This magical woman in her blue salsa shoes, just like dancing the night away. It's actually so sad. I won't get too deep into it, but I've definitely gotten out of shape. Like, I remember back in the day, I could salsa dance for like hours straight, like no breaks. And now I feel like I'd be lucky if I lasted like 10 minutes. So I'm working on it this year, but yeah, it makes me so sad. Anyway, just a reminder that pressure may make diamonds, but it will not help you make friends. And there is really just something so alluring about a person that is willing to go out and just do whatever they want. Yes, I just called myself alluring, deal with it. But in all seriousness, I do think that if you love spending time with yourself and you know how to have a good time on your own, it will only make you better at making friends. And I say this because it's so funny to me that the definition of loneliness is centered around not being near people, because the times in my life where I've felt real intense loneliness, it's rarely been because I'm by myself. It's actually usually when I'm in a friendship or a relationship that's not working. So again, with my college ex, I remember when I would talk to him when I was in Italy, and one night we got off Skype and I had never felt more alone. And it was such a crazy experience for me at the time. I couldn't wrap words around it, because it's like, this is somebody that I care about. And that I don't know, did I love him at that time? I don't know. Somebody I care about. We'll stick with that. This is somebody that I care about and I enjoyed spending time with. And in this moment, I do not enjoy spending time with him. I would have rather talked to myself. And then with my former podcast host, it was a similar thing. We would spend hours together recording, and I would always leave our sessions being like, who is this person? I don't feel like the person that is being presented on the podcast is the same person that's in front of me when we stop recording. And that person, the off-podcast person, was just really draining and isolating and kind of gross to be around for such long periods of time. So for me, I just also think that it's important to talk about this other way that loneliness can show up for people, because I will say for me, because I typically feel loneliness with other people, it's tended to be a sign in my life that I might be in the wrong relationship. But it was so hard for me to process because, again, if we only view loneliness as not being around other people, then technically I wasn't lonely. But that's why I like the definition where it talks about being cut off from people, because if people are making you feel either cut off from others or cut off from yourself and your joy, that's actually what I think creates loneliness. Okay, let's recap what we talked about today. Being alone and being lonely are not the same thing. Being alone is just a circumstance, and loneliness is just an emotion that we can experience as a result of being alone. But it is definitely not the only emotion available to us when we're alone. Society has trained us to see being alone in a negative way, which is what creates negative emotions like loneliness. But if we can change how we think about being alone to being more positive, we can feel more productive emotions that will allow us to take actions that bring about the results we desire. So instead of faking it until we make it, we need to start believing it until we achieve it, okay? And lastly, don't be afraid to find the joy in the searching process. I actually believe that because I'm not afraid to do things I love by myself, it actually increases my likelihood of either finding new friends or getting old friends engaged with what I'm doing, because they see how happy I am doing the thing that I love and they're like, oh, I want me some of that. She got that vibing and thriving glow. Okay, how do I get me some of that? And I'm here to tell you that it's by doing you, boo. That's it. As always, feel free to hit me up on social media or in our free exclusive Facebook group if this episode gives you thoughts or revelations that you want to share with me. And we also have a Patreon that you can join for exclusive access to perks and convos that you do not want to miss out on. And again, sending so much love and positive vibes as we get through this retrograde. Only 10 more days, but who's counting? I'm not counting. Are you counting? Because I'm not. All right, besties, my dog is growling at me. He's like, you've been in your office for too long, Mom, and I want to cuddle. So I love y'all. I'm out. Are you loving Real Talk Friend Therapy? Of course you are. So don't forget to show us some love with a 5-star review wherever you are listening, and to join our Patreon to unlock bonus recordings, videos, private chats, and more.